It started with a small, nagging feeling, the kind that worms its way into your mind and refuses to leave. At first, I brushed it off. Work stress, lack of sleep, maybe even paranoia. But something about my wife, Julia, had changed. She had always been particular about how the house looked, spotless, organized, almost staged for a magazine cover. Lately, though, I'd come home to little things that didn't make sense. A damp towel in the guest bathroom when neither of us used it. An empty coffee mug in the sink when I'd been at work all day. The faintest whiff of a cologne that wasn't mine. I told myself I was overthinking. Then came the packages. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She started ordering things online more often, little knickknacks, beauty products, clothes. But what stood out was how she acted when the courier arrived. Julia had never been the friendly type, but suddenly, she was lingering at the door, laughing at something he said, tucking her hair behind her ear like a shy teenager. The first time I noticed it, I shrugged it off. The second time, I felt the prick of something uneasy. By the third, I started watching closely. It wasn't just casual. One evening, I came home early. Julia hadn't expected me, and when I stepped inside, she was in the kitchen, smiling, flushed, her hair slightly tousled. The front door had just shut. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too bright. "You're home early." I nodded, glancing toward the door. "Who was that?" She hesitated. Just a flicker of a second, but I caught it. "Just the delivery guy. I ordered some skincare stuff." I walked over, picked up the box, and turned it in my hands. No label, no branding, just a plain cardboard package. "Skincare, huh?" She grabbed it from me, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, you know me. Gotta keep the wrinkles away." That night, I barely slept. Something was going on, and I was going to find out what. The next day, I left for work as usual. But instead of driving straight to the office, I parked a few blocks away and waited. Julia had always been predictable. She had a routine, morning coffee, a bit of yoga, and then she'd either work from home or go out to run errands. If something was happening, it would be around the same time. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding harder than it should have been. Was I really doing this? Spying on my own wife? But the memory of her flustered face, that hesitation when I asked about the courier, it gnawed at me. At exactly 10:15 a.m., I saw the familiar white delivery van pull up to our driveway. Right on schedule. I watched as the guy stepped out. Young, maybe mid-20s, fit, wearing a tight polo with the delivery company's logo. His hair was a little too perfectly styled for someone lugging around packages all day. He walked to the front door, and before he could even knock, Julia opened it. She was expecting him. I gritted my teeth as they exchanged smiles. Hers was wide, too wide. His was cocky. He handed her a small package, but neither of them moved. They stood there, talking, laughing. Then Julia stepped aside, and he walked in. My stomach dropped. I had seen enough. I threw the car into drive and sped off. I couldn't sit there, couldn't risk losing control and doing something I'd regret. Instead, I forced myself to think, to plan. I needed proof. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. This was happening in my house, right under my nose. I pulled into an electronics store and walked straight to the security section. The salesman barely had time to give his pitch before I told him exactly what I needed. Small, discreet cameras, something easy to hide. By the time I left, I had a plan. That night, after Julia went to bed, I set up the cameras. One in the living room, one facing the front door, and the last one, right in our bedroom. I didn't want to believe it, but by tomorrow, I'd have my answer. And once I did, there'd be no turning back. The next morning felt like any other, but I knew everything was different. Julia kissed me goodbye like she always did, smiling as she sipped her coffee, completely unaware that our house had become a surveillance zone overnight. I played my part perfectly calm, casual, as if I didn't suspect a thing. Then, I left for work. Or at least, she thought I did. Instead of heading to the office, I parked in my usual spot a few blocks away and waited. Again. Sure enough, at exactly 10:15 a.m., the courier's van rolled into our driveway. My chest tightened as I watched him walk up to the door. This time, I didn't need to stick around. I already knew what was going to happen next. I turned on my phone, opened the security app, and waited for the footage to start streaming. The front door camera showed Julia opening up before he even knocked. She was already smiling, tucking her hair behind her ear, shifting her weight like a nervous schoolgirl. The living room camera caught the moment she let him inside. He stepped in with that same cocky grin, hands stuffed into his pockets like he owned the place. And then, the bedroom camera feed loaded. My stomach twisted. The two of them walked in casually, like this was just another part of their routine. Julia sat on the edge of our bed, and he stepped between her legs, tilting her chin up to look at him. She laughed. He leaned down. I shut my phone off. I had seen enough. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I could feel my pulse in my temples, a deep, throbbing rage bubbling up. But I wasn't going to act on impulse. Not yet. No, I had something better in mind. I took a deep breath, started the car, and drove off. It was time to make this hurt. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to calm the storm inside me. The image of Julia sitting on our bed with that courier, laughing, comfortable, like it was nothing, kept playing in my head. Every time I blinked, I saw it again. I wanted to go back, kick down the door, and tear that smug bastard apart. But I knew that wouldn't fix anything. It would just make me the crazy, jealous husband while they played the victims. No, I needed something smarter. Something that would destroy them in a way they wouldn't see coming. So, I made a call. "Hey, man," I said when my buddy Chris picked up. "You still know that PI you used last year?" Chris hesitated. "Yeah. Why? What's going on?" "I need proof. Real proof." A pause. Then a sigh. "Shit. Julia." "Yeah." 10 minutes later, I had the PI's number. I called him immediately, gave him the basics, and within the hour, he was on board. He'd do the digging, track the courier, find out if this was just a fling or if Julia had been screwing around for longer than I thought. And when he found what I needed, I was going to make sure Julia regretted every second of it. That night, I played the part of the oblivious husband. I came home, kissed Julia on the cheek, ate dinner with her like nothing had changed. But I saw her differently now. The way she smiled. The way she touched me. Every laugh, every glance, it all felt fake. And maybe it had been for a long time. I asked her how her day was, and she gave me the usual answer. Worked a little, ran some errands, did laundry. Same script, different day. She didn't mention her little midday session in our bedroom. She didn't even flinch. I nodded along, acting interested, pretending I didn't know she had another man's hands on her just hours ago. By the time we went to bed, my plan was set. I had the cameras, the PI, and now all I had to do was wait. Julia thought she was getting away with it. But she had no idea the walls were closing in. The next morning, I woke up before Julia. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing beside me. It disgusted me. I turned my head slightly and looked at her. She was sleeping so peacefully, like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back. Like she wasn't bringing another man into our home, into our bed. For a split second, I wanted to wake her up and lay everything out right then and there. Show her the footage, shove my phone in her face, and watch her try to lie her way out of it. But I didn't. Instead, I got up quietly, took a shower, and left the house without a word. I had a plan to stick to. By noon, I got the first call from the PI. "Got something interesting for you already," he said. "That was fast," I muttered, stepping out of the office and into my car. "Your guy? The courier?" "His name's Kyle. 25 years old, single, lives in some cheap apartment across town. And here's the fun part, he's got a history of screwing around with married women." I gripped the steering wheel. "What?" "Yeah. He's been caught up in a couple of affairs before. Even got his ass kicked by a jealous husband last year. But the guy never learns. He's got a type older, married women. Probably enjoys the thrill of it. That, or he's just a sleazy piece of shit who gets off on ruining marriages." I exhaled slowly. Jesus. "Oh, and here's the kicker," the PI continued. "Your wife? She's not the only one. I found some texts between him and another married woman. He's juggling at least 2, maybe more." My stomach churned. So Julia wasn't even special. She wasn't in some grand love affair, just another conquest for this idiot. Another bored housewife letting some punk use her because she was too selfish to realize what she had. I leaned my head back against the headrest, gripping my phone so hard I thought it might crack. "Keep digging," I finally said. "I want everything." "You got it." That night, I walked into the house feeling different. Stronger. Julia was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she poured a glass of wine. She looked up, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Hey, babe," she said. "You're home late." "Yeah. Busy day." She walked over, kissed me on the cheek. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to pull away. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." She bought it. We had dinner together, talked about random things, and later, she curled up against me on the couch while we watched TV. It was almost laughable how easy it was for her to act normal. But the difference between us? I wasn't pretending. I wasn't clueless. And soon enough, she was going to realize just how big of a mistake she had made. The next few days were pure torture. Every time Julia smiled at me, touched me, kissed me, I had to fight the urge to push her away. She had no idea that I knew. No idea that I was just biding my time, collecting every piece of evidence I needed. And the PI? He was delivering. On Wednesday, he sent me the first real proof pictures of Julia and Kyle in my driveway, her leaning against the doorframe like some giddy teenager while he stood close, hand resting casually on her hip. Then, the bombshell. A video. I sat alone in my car that night, gripping my phone so hard my fingers ached as I watched it. Julia and Kyle, in his van, parked just a few blocks away from our house. Her laughing, touching his arm, then climbing into the back with him. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Enough to know exactly what was happening. I turned my phone off and sat in the darkness, breathing through the rage clawing at my chest. She was doing this to me. To us. And for what? Some sleazy courier who was screwing other married women at the same time? I wanted to storm home and throw her out right then and there. But I wasn't going to let anger make my decisions for me. No, I was going to make this hurt. So I waited. Planned. And when the moment was right, I was going to ruin her world just like she had ruined mine. That night, I climbed into bed beside her. She was already asleep, curled up on her side, breathing softly. I stared at her for a long time. This woman, the one I had loved for years, the one I had built a life with, she wasn't who I thought she was. She was a liar. A cheater. A pathetic, selfish woman who threw away everything for a cheap thrill. And she had no idea what was coming. The morning after watching that video, everything felt different. Julia woke up like nothing was wrong, stretching, yawning, and curling into my side. Her fingers ran over my chest, her body warm against mine. "Morning," she murmured, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. I stared at the ceiling. I wanted to shove her away. I wanted to throw the blanket off and ask her how she could even look me in the eye after what she had done. But I didn't. I needed to play my role. So instead, I kissed her on the forehead and said, "Morning." She beamed, completely oblivious. The worst part? She looked happy, like sneaking around behind my back, lying straight to my face, and crawling into bed with me afterward didn't weigh on her at all. Maybe it didn't. Maybe she had convinced herself that what she was doing wasn't that bad, that it wasn't hurting me, because in her mind, I'd never find out. But she was wrong. So wrong. By lunchtime, I got another update from the PI. I followed Kyle after his shift, he said. "Your wife's not the only one. He met up with another woman this morning. Different neighborhood, same routine. Walked right into her house like he owned the place." I clenched my jaw. Unbelievable. Yeah, but listen, this guy's reckless. Sloppy. He doesn't cover his tracks. If you want to expose this, it won't be hard. I rubbed a hand over my face. Good. Keep following him. I need everything. Because now, I wasn't just going to take Julia down. I was going to take him down, too. And when I was done, neither of them would see it coming. That night, I could barely look at her. Julia cooked dinner like she always did, humming to herself, completely at ease. She slid a plate in front of me, then leaned down and kissed the top of my head. I felt sick. How could she touch me with the same hand she used on him? How could she kiss me after doing God knows what in the back of his disgusting van? But I forced myself to play along. "Smells great," I said, keeping my voice even. She smiled, sitting across from me. "I tried that new recipe you liked from last week." I nodded, chewing slowly, barely tasting the food. She was trying to be a good wife, trying to maintain the illusion. Too bad I already knew it was all bullshit. Halfway through dinner, she picked up her phone and glanced at the screen. Just a quick flick of her eyes, but I caught it. I knew exactly who she was checking for. So I decided to push. "Something interesting?" I asked casually, stabbing a piece of steak. She looked up, her face smooth, practiced. "HM? Oh, no. Just an email from work." A perfect, effortless lie. I nodded, acting like I believed her, but inside, my blood boiled. I was done sitting on this. It was time to set the trap. The next morning, I called the PI. "You still tailing Kyle?" I asked. "Yeah. He's got to stop today at your place, right?" "Yeah. But I don't just want more photos this time." The PI hesitated. "What are you thinking?" I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening on the phone. "I want to catch them in the act. I want something undeniable." The plan started forming in my head, piece by piece. I was going to make sure Julia and Kyle had the perfect opportunity to do what they had already been doing. And then, I was going to walk in. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized it was over. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. I kissed Julia goodbye, just like always, told her I had a long day ahead, and then I left. But instead of going to work, I parked a few blocks away and waited. 10:15 a.m. Right on schedule, Kyle's van pulled into my driveway. I watched from my car, my pulse pounding in my ears. He strolled up to the door, cocky as ever, and Julia let him in without hesitation. She didn't even check to see if the coast was clear. She was comfortable with this. That pissed me off more than anything. I pulled out my phone and checked the camera feed. They were in the living room. Julia was laughing, playfully shoving his shoulder. He grabbed her by the waist and pulled her in, his hands wandering down her back as she tilted her head up toward him. Disgusting. I let them settle in for a few minutes. Let them think they had all the time in the world. Then, I got out of my car. I moved fast, heart pounding, step steady. I wanted them to feel this. I pulled my spare key from my pocket, slid it into the lock, and turned. The moment the door swung open, I heard it. A gasp. A thud, probably Julia scrambling to get away from him. Then silence. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me, slow and deliberate. They were frozen in the living room. Julia's face drained of color, eyes wide with pure terror. She had one hand clutched to her chest, her robe slightly open, revealing a lace bra I had never seen before. Kyle? He just stood there, halfway to pulling his shirt over his head, looking like a deer in headlights. For a second, none of us moved. Then, I smiled. Not an angry smile. Not an emotional one. A cold smile. The kind that let them know I had already won. Don't stop on my account, I said, my voice eerily calm. I'd hate to interrupt. Julia made a strangled noise in the back of her throat. Kyle took a step back, glancing toward the door like he was calculating his chances of escape. Too late for that. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen, and turned it toward them. A clear, high-definition image of them from yesterday popped up, Julia on our bed, Kyle standing between her legs. Her breath hitched. Kyle muttered, "Oh, shit." I let that sink in for a second. Then, I chuckled. Yeah. Oh, shit is right. Julia's face twisted into something between horror and desperation. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Kyle, on the other hand, recovered quicker. He straightened up, running a hand through his hair, trying to play it cool. Look, man, he started, forcing a smirk. I think we should just... I cut him off with a single step forward. Just one. His smirk disappeared instantly. He wasn't so cocky now. You should what? I asked, my voice deathly calm. Kyle swallowed hard. His eyes darted to Julia, like he was expecting her to say something, to defend him. She didn't. She just stood there, trembling, hands clutching at her robe like it could somehow protect her from the storm she knew was coming. I turned my gaze to her. You have anything to say? I asked, tilting my head. Her lip quivered. I can explain. I laughed. A cold, humorless laugh. Oh, I bet you can. She took a shaky step toward me, tears welling in her eyes. Please, just let me. I held up a hand. She froze. No, I said simply. You don't get to explain anything. I lifted my phone again, scrolling through the images. You don't get to lie, or beg, or play the victim. I know everything. She let out a choked sob, covering her mouth. Kyle, apparently realizing he was in way over his head, took another step back. Nah, man, I think I should go, he muttered, inching toward the door. I turned to him, my jaw tight. Yeah, you should. Kyle hesitated for a second, probably wondering if I was about to take a swing at him. Then he bolted. Straight out the door. Gone. Coward. Julia flinched at the sound of the door slamming shut. Her shoulders shook, tears spilling down her face. I stared at her, feeling nothing. No sadness. No heartbreak. Just disgust. She had ruined everything. And now? I was going to make sure she suffered for it. Julia collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. It was pathetic, really. She wasn't crying because she was sorry. She was crying because she got caught. I stood there, watching her break down, and felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just a hollow emptiness where my love for her used to be. Say something, she whimpered, her voice cracking. I exhaled slowly. What do you want me to say, Julia? She looked up, her mascara running. It wasn't. Don't lie to me, I snapped, cutting her off. I have video of you screwing him in our bed, Julia. Our bed. Don't insult me by pretending it wasn't what it was. She flinched, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I made a mistake, she whispered. It didn't mean anything. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean anything? Oh, that makes it so much better. She wiped her face, trying to compose herself. I was lonely. You've been distant. I didn't plan for this to happen. I clenched my jaw. Oh, really? You didn't plan to invite your boy toy over while I was at work? Didn't plan to sneak around behind my back for weeks? Her silence told me everything I needed to know. She had planned it. Every damn time. She sniffled, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. She froze. For the first time, I saw it, the realization creeping in. That there was no coming back from this. That I wasn't going to just scream and argue and eventually forgive her. She was losing me. For good. I inhaled deeply, keeping my voice calm. Here's how this is going to go, Julia. She stared up at me, eyes wide with fear. You're going to pack a bag and leave tonight. She let out a strangled gasp. Wait, what? You heard me. My voice was cold, detached. You're not staying here. You can go to a friend's place, a hotel. I don't give a damn. But you're not sleeping under the same roof as me ever again. She shook her head, panic setting in. No, please, let's talk. There's nothing to talk about, I cut in. I'm filing for divorce. This, I gestured between us, is over. She broke completely. No, 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 please, don't do this. She grabbed onto my shirt, sobbing into my chest. I'll do anything, please, just give me a chance to fix this. I pried her hands off me. There's nothing left to fix, Julia. Her body shook with sobs, but I didn't care. She had made her choice. And now, she was going to face the consequences. Julia sat there, broken, her face streaked with tears, but I didn't feel a damn thing. She kept shaking her head, muttering please over and over, but it was useless. She had already lost me. I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I could hear her behind me, stumbling after me. Wait, we can work through this. We canoe. I swung open the closet and grabbed a suitcase, tossed it onto the bed and unzipped it. She gasped. What are you doing? I didn't even look at her as I started yanking her clothes off the hangers, tossing them inside. Helping you pack. She rushed forward, grabbing my hands, trying to stop me. No. Stop. I live here. I pulled away, leveling her with a cold stare. Not anymore. Her lips trembled. I have nowhere to go. Not my problem. She stared at me, stunned. Like she couldn't believe I was actually doing this. That I wasn't playing some jealous husband act that would end with me forgiving her. But this wasn't a game. I was done. I grabbed my phone and tapped a few buttons. She jumped when my voice cut through the silence. Hey, Mark? Yeah, I need a locksmith. ASAP. Change all the locks tonight. Julia let out a panicked sob. No. Ryan, please. I ignored her. Great. I'll be here. She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Her face twisted, frustration and desperation mixing together. You're making a mistake, she hissed. You're throwing away everything we built. Everything we were. I let out a bitter laugh. You threw it away, Julia. Not me. Her mouth opened, then shut. She knew I was right. I zipped up the suitcase and shoved it toward her. Get out. She just stood there, staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Because the man she betrayed? The man who would have done anything for her? That man didn't exist anymore. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she grabbed the suitcase, sobbing quietly as she dragged it toward the door. She paused one last time, turning to me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I met her eyes, completely emotionless. I don't care. And with that, I shut the door behind her. The divorce was quick. I had all the proof I needed, and she knew fighting it would only drag out the inevitable. Kyle? Oh, he got what was coming. Turns out, I wasn't the only husband who wanted revenge. The other married woman he was screwing? Well, her husband found out too. And let's just say Kyle learned the hard way that messing with married women wasn't exactly a safe career choice. I moved on. I got my house back. My life back. And Julia? She tried reaching out a few times, but I never responded. Because as far as I was concerned, she was nothing more than a bad memory. And I was finally free.